I'm with Jenn Shaver, who is the managing partner at Empowered Self Storage Consulting and Management. Today, we're going to talk a lot about automation and remote management. So, Jen, maybe give everyone just a quick background on kind of what you're doing at your company and what your background is in self storage.
Sure. So I got into self-storage almost 20 years ago. Did the whole evolution of start from an admin, work your way to facility manager, DM regional, and then moved into working directly with an owner, kind of recreating an entire brand. It was a luxury kind of self-storage brand. And from there, I had an opportunity to join Noki as the learning and development manager and work with that because I had used Noki kind of as an early adopter and found a lot of success with it in running a site. And then from there, moved on to director of tech support. And since then, Lindsay and I decided we really wanted to be back in operations. She and I worked together at a few other companies. So we took this as an opportunity to get back into operations. And what we're doing now is we're working with clients who are either new to the industry or are looking on how to scale or optimize their operations. And so we work with them on team development and different restructuring to help them become, kind of experts in the field as well and save them time on making decisions and kind of vetting different vendors and options for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to kind of kick this off and set the stage, how does someone determine if remote management is a right choice for them to go down and ultimately venture into and see kind of how they implement that?
I think it has a lot to do with what's working for your operations or what your plan is for your operations. I see a lot of people that like the idea of not having to manage staff or the cost of staff or the turnover of staff. And so they like remote management for the piece of I can do it myself or I can do it from different locations or I can really be efficient with the tools and resources I have. And that is a good solution for everybody. But I think it's a great opportunity for us to talk today about what are the decision makers behind whether or not that's a good fit for you, because the idea of just turning on the right tools and walking away and sitting at a beach it's not really a set and forget. It's, the key word there, whether you're doing, a staffing model or you're doing a remote management model, is that it absolutely is still management. It's just which tools and, kind of are we going to use to achieve that goal and what it's the experience that we're looking for, both in our tenant and also our operations experience.
Yeah, and that's what I find as well with automation. There's like the thought that you just kind of set it and forget it. You never have to do anything. But
Yeah.
a lot of times where it comes in is like sort of streamlining your process to a degree or amplifying something you're already doing. So is there a certain like size facility or is there a certain criteria you look at when deciding if they should start looking into remote management?
Well, I like to go is, really break down what your operational or tenant journey is. You could really do it from either one. I think it should be better to do it from the tenant perspective and start there is what does that roadmap look like? Because then you're going to identify quickly, where are the pieces that we're missing to be remote. So a lot of times if you start, for instance, with a website, if your website does not allow a customer to find you and go all the way through a rental, then you're not ready for remote management yet because you need some type of tool that can fully replace what the manager's doing just leasing a unit, or that could be in the form of payment or account management where I'm updating an auto pay or changing my address online. If your portal can do those things, then you have a good starting ground for completing that tenant journey from start to finish with whatever that looks like. If you've got barriers where they've got to come in the office to finish signing the lease because you don't have an e-sign, platform, if they've got to be able to come in and bring a copy of their ID, that's where you want to identify those barriers to figure out, do I have the right tool in place right now that I can just launch and start? Or do I need to start with, hey, I'm not prepared yet to be able to do this remotely. And that's where some of the pieces I start with as far as tenant journey, but you can also do it for operations. Maybe we've continually had stores that are just hard to find the right staff for. So then I would look at what it takes to replace the staff you don't have at that particular store. And that's where you might want to start from operations point of view. So I think the main thing is what is your pain point, and kind of start through there and really map it out because you'll quickly figure out where those major holes are, where you can get the most bang for your buck to put in a resource, if not more than one, to fix that. And then from there, you can get choosy about, do I want to keep going with this? Do I want to go further? Is there, a bigger piece of the puzzle to complete, or that's holes that are missing? Or is where my budget is? This is where my time is. If I start here, the next piece will fall into line once I have this one kind of organized.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. There's no real one size fits all approach. It sounds like you really need to audit your situation, map out
Yeah.
everything you're currently doing, and then maybe take a step back and start to think about, okay, now where can I start to look to automate
Yeah.
and go down that route? Now, we were talking a little bit about like tech versus team. Where does it make sense where you do still need kind of team members and people to do the work, and where does it make sense to implement technology, and kind of what's your process there?
Well, this is one where when, talking with different store managers and kind of what the operations and owners, this is a big point where it almost feels like if I invest in tech, it means I'm moving away from my team. And it's like if I invest in this tech, which part of my team, how much of my team am I letting go and I replacing? But I've always thought of technology as how do I do more with my all-stars and how do I do more with the team I have? So that made me myself, for me, technology is how I can have tools in place at all my sites to see what's going on so I can have involvement into all the facilities. It's not for me a way that I can be on site at every single one. It's I can't do it without the tools. And so this is where, team for me is when we put in, smart technology into our sites in Colorado, it was about utilizing more of our team resources. So for instance, you take a lock check. If we have smart locks, those are doing their own lock checks. Those are, automating overlocks, automating removing overlocks, all those different pieces of leasing and preparing a unit to be re-rented. If that is being handled by the lock itself, it means I've freed up 6 to 10 hours of my team's time, which means I now have, potentially 25% of their work week now available for us to do customer facing things, revenue generating things, because the locks have taken care of that piece of themselves. So I always think of the technology as a tool for your team, not necessarily as just a complete replacement, because somebody's still cleaning up those units. Somebody is still taking care of the stuff on the facility. Somebody's still answering the phone. So now I've freed up my team to do those things that the smart lock, for instance, can't do.
Yeah, I think that's a important point too. It's not necessarily about letting everybody go and reducing the size of your team dramatically. It's more to your point there on like resource utilization. You're now freeing up all this bandwidth that you could then distribute to other things. What are some of the things you would tend to like shift people's time into? Like now that you've freed up a little bit of time by automating some things, is there certain tasks or like work that you find lends better to the team that people are going to have
Yeah.
in place?
I mean, this is something where, you can look at your own stats and your own experiences, and it might be a pain point or it might be a way of saying, hey, we do this one task really great. How do I find more time to dedicate to that task? So that might be, maybe our team is better about lead generation and following up on those leads than maybe our call center is. So I'm going to take some of the bandwidth, and kind of reduce the pressure off the call center and take it in-house, or vice versa, is going, hey, the call center is zeroed in and they have the skill set to follow up every lead. My staff can be doing something different and making sure that they're answering new calls, or they're doing something with payments, or they're doing something to clean the facility. It's all about, where's that pain point? Do I have a solution now that's working? Do I have a solution that it's okay? And just really look at what is my team good at? And then I'm going to look first at how to replace things that, isn't worth their time to be doing, because even though they can't answer the phone, every time they do, they're stopping and doing what? So again, this is where you really break down that tenant journey. You really break down the operator journey and go, if we're going to be human, if we're going to use our human resources, I've got 8 hours. So I have to be very selective with how I use, their 8 hours, or maybe it's a hub and spoke and I've got them just for pieces at each facility. I have to be deadly with their time and very efficient with their time, because I need to be using tools on places where it doesn't take, a highly skilled team member to be in.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about the trade-offs a lot of times, where everyone has a finite amount of time and energy, and sort of if you're using that on one thing, and it seems like maybe it's cost effective, you could be taking away from something else that might be more impactful. So
Well,
yeah,
then really observe your team, and maybe that's secret shopping, maybe that's hiring an outside resource to look at that. But there's so many times where I've gone into an office and the team reminds me of a squirrel in the middle of the road who doesn't know which way to go. They're afraid to leave their desk because what if the phone rings? But they're afraid to not get everything done. And so you look at your team, they're like, what are you supposed to be doing right now? And their answer is, I think everything. And you're like, well, that's not possible. So how are you prioritizing where to spend your time? And does your team know the same priorities that you have versus what they think their day looks like and how they should be spending their time? And a lot of times just aligning with what you think they should be doing and how they're actually spending their time will identify those areas of, well, what do you mean it takes you guys this amount of time doing this one task? I thought that task was much, easier to do or took less time to do. Therefore, is there a better solution for how I can do that?
yeah, that makes a lot of sense there, because when you're evaluating those kind of things, it's interesting to actually dig into what are like the actual resources needed to complete certain tasks. Sometimes we
Yeah.
think it takes a certain amount of time, or maybe you find out it's actually more efficient
Right.
or it takes longer. Do you recommend people sort of audit that to some degree on like some kind of cadence, maybe like monthly or quarterly, kind of checking in on like, okay, here's our tasks. Like, let's reevaluate maybe our SOPs, how long things take. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the particular resource itself, but I always believe in checking to make sure that just because it worked in the past, is it still working? Is it still our best option? Is this a temporary solution until we can put in something that's maybe larger to roll out and deploy, or maybe costs more, or we're waiting for a certain budget piece? There's also pieces of, the facility itself. When you open a brand new build facility and new construction, it's all hands on deck. You might need full technology, full staff. But as it starts to lease up and you're not renting as many units in the same day, or you're not turning over those units at the same time, that's my piece where maybe it's heavy hands on in the beginning, but you'll start to back it off with more automations as that site, reaches a level of stability. So this is where I think it's important to be flexible and to kind of look at what are my goals, what are my pain points, what am I solving for, kind of in that equation, because there's too many times where you can just buy the latest and greatest of everything, and you can buy, everything that's just amazing. But if you're not really looking at what's the point in which we evaluate this, what are our measuring points to say how well this is working, or are we getting our valuation of our money's worth out of this particular product, and then comparing that to if we were doing it manually, with a staff member, what would that, kind of results look like? For instance, just even being open, and there's so many operators who are afraid to turn on online rentals because they believe the manager should play a role still, and they want to have that face-to-face interaction, or they think their tenant wants a face-to-face interaction. And I would really question, how come the store down the street might have online rentals, which means they're potentially open for business 24 hours a day, and you're limiting yourself to 8. And so that's where, maybe it makes sense to have the online rentals, as something that can be on in the background, and you've got your face-to-face time, for your busy hours during the day, and play out both. But even then, I would question the idea of, if you're spending money to generate website, traffic to your website and have people come there, just the whole evolution of the website. Originally, it was an online business card, and here's where you're going to download your map course directions to print out, and here's our phone number, call us. Where nowadays, if I go online to a website, I'm expecting to be able to do full business. I'm not expecting to go to your website in order for the point of leaving to drive to you or to pick up a phone and call you. To me, I've reached you here. Why would I not be able to complete my journey here? The odds of me taking the time to leave this website and call you on the phone or drive to your location, you've lost some of that traffic just in, but I was ready to do it now. I'm not ready to take on a chore of whatever next step you'd like me to jump through. So that's where I really look at, if we are going to be implementing tools, what is that threshold? What is that tool's purpose? Does the tool have any restrictions and limitations as far as, like I said, if the customer has reached us, what business can they not do online and why? And if they're reaching my office, what's my staff doing? And is my staff, there to be utilized as the best resource? Are they out cleaning? They're not in the office anyways, or they're sitting at the office just waiting for somebody to walk in. And therefore I need to figure out how to clean the facility because my manager is ready and waiting to answer that phone like I've instructed them. Is that the best use of their time? So that's where I really think the audit is the best place to start with, and looking at where do I have an opportunity to improve? Where are we spending time right now? Is, if that resource today was unavailable, would that still be the same thing I'm trying to replace, or is this my opportunity to go further? And I just put in, checks into that. Is, how often do I want to answer this question? There's times where we'll talk to an operator that says, I still want to take cash and checks. Okay, well, what's the threshold of when your transactions have been reduced within cash and checks to a certain amount? What's the threshold for reevaluating that or shutting it down? If you're not ready to shut it down right now, then identify the point either when you want to reevaluate if that still makes sense to you, or the threshold of, this is the point where I'm turning it off, is when it's trickled down to this percentage of my transactions here. So if you're going to include something and you're not ready to make a decision to include tech now or to upgrade to a tech, I would say put in that barrier for reevaluating, and put in that barrier for, when I cross this threshold, it's time to have that conversation again, or that's when the decision gets made. I was listening to somebody speak at the Texas show, and they said, they reference a book of Who Moved My Cheese, which is a fantastic book. And I think that technology is one of those times of, the cheese and the tenants have moved. And if you're going to choose to stay in the same spot, I not only question that decision, but I question that you and your competitors who are now fighting over a smaller piece of cheese, do you really, is there really enough customers left for you to fight over? And what's your reasoning for, well, if my competitors stay, why not take advantage of getting out there ahead of, in the beginning, and moving now, maybe you don't have the budget, or maybe you don't have the kind of safety to be able to be the first adopter and to be the first one that's experimenting and can take, those trial and error periods. But are you next in line, or is there somebody that, hey, there's a REIT in my area, and so if they're not doing this technology yet, maybe I don't need to. But since they've got the time and the tools and the resource to evaluate when it's time to turn on, maybe I just watch them. And the moment they turn it on and they're starting to get some results, maybe that's time for me to look at, am I ready to be next, or am I coming up third, or am I waiting to be the last person to hold on to the little niche, and just know that when it dries out, I'm going to move at that point. So that's where I really look at, who are you in your market? Where do you want to be? Maybe you're a later adopter and you want to be an earlier adopter, and map that out. And like I said, there's something we talk to operators where they're saying, I don't have the bandwidth or the budget or the time to really be chasing down every single new tech and vetting them until they're to a point where they work for me. Great. Then find the operator who is doing that and just watch them. And they become the person that you're kind of checking for. When is it my turn, based off of, what they've done to roll that out and the success they're seeing with it, or the struggles they're seeing with it, or the costs involved.
Yeah, I really liked your point about a lot of times, first, we don't even sometimes know the goal of what we're trying to achieve by implementing something. Like, you just see other people using a certain tool and it's like, okay, that's
Right.
probably going to help us. But first, identifying what's the goal. And to your larger point, the second thing I think I see, some people know their goal, but then there's no evaluation or no metrics in place to decide what does good look like, and then when do we know we
Yeah.
need to adjust or kind of make some changes. So how do you go
Well,
about helping operators kind of like understand that, like setting those goals, having some metrics to look at to really make sure we're evaluating what we're doing?
I mean, that could be a matter of how many calls come in and what time they come in, and what is the cost involved hourly with staff to be on there for those calls. Are we first capturing them during the hours the calls are coming in? And secondly, what does it cost per call to do that? And then I would also look at, what am I losing as far as efficiency and productivity of that manager to answer the phone, so then they're not doing XYZ. But a big thing that I would say that doesn't get done very well, and a lot of the operators that I study, is when you implement a tool, is really evaluating your entire operational piece, and have you rolled out that tool correctly down to your operational playbook or your So again, just being, what we have saw with Noki is, here you've got a site that went with smart locks, right? But nobody changed the manual or the employee handbook or the standard operating procedures to include what to do if your site gets full smart locks. And so therefore you have a manager who goes, well, I'm evaluated based off of me completing these tasks. And do they actually need to do those tasks anymore? Or have you rewritten what they should be doing now that you've got a lock doing 25% of a manager's hours that normally were spent, to lock maintenance and management? If they're not doing that, what should they be doing to look successful? Have you changed your employee evaluation? Have you changed, different things? Like, if you roll out a call center who's now expected to take those phone calls and collect on delinquency, or even just handling incoming leads, if your manager is still incentivized to chase down every lead and is scored based off of their conversion rate, then you haven't incentivized them to stop answering the phone and do something else, because you've now rolled out this tool in place to do that for them. So really looking at, have you trained your staff of what it looks like for them? Do they understand why you chose this technology and this tool? Because sometimes they think it's there to replace them, right? Robots are here to take my job. So, you look at an operator or an owner and they say, well, I rolled out this tool to help my team. Why is my team not using it? And your team's thinking, well, if it does a good job, I won't have one. So that's where it's like, what does a good job for your team look like? And a lot of times it's how to support that tool and how to support that technology, and or how to change what they're doing with their day, and how to be successful in a new way, because now this one task is taken care of. So that's one where, when you're really rolling out something is, and back to your pain point of, identifying the tenant journey or the operational journey, is look at your own operations and your directions and your teams. What does that look like? Is your middle management, like your district managers and your regional, do they know how to support it? A lot of times they're in charge of the settings and the training and the management for it, but they're not on site working with this tool, engaging with it. So do they have the infrastructure behind it to support that and to manage it, let alone your on-site team or your, managers or your boots on the ground kind of type people, are they using that? So it's really taking a magnifying glass and identifying all the way through, is because you can go to a trade show and you can go to a conference and we're all there to sell you everything, and everything sounds great and wonderful, like your life's going to be amazingly easy. But then going back in and, first identifying which ones that you need and which ones are a must have right now, or which ones are, when we cross this point, it'd be nice to have that one and roll that one out next. What does that kind of overall plan look like? But then if you're going to introduce one, every time we introduced something, and it was Nokia that we first really did it with, was when we had first put in Nokia. I like to say that we bought it for the wrong reasons, which is we just thought it was going to be cool to stand out for tenants in our market. We were going to a well-established market. None of our competitors had smart locks. We thought, great, we'll give our tenants a smart lock. We'll give them an app. They'll love us for it. We'll eat up faster. But then once we opened the doors, it was like, okay, we have a smart lock here. How does that affect what our managers are doing? The first time we came across a delinquent unit, it was like, well, what do we do now? We can't put a red overlock on this. So what's my new task to do that? And so you should really take a tool like that or a technology and go, how, every aspect and every detail this affects my operational business. Let's analyze it and go, okay, yes, this has an impact. So I need to change, a notice that goes to my tenants by text or by email because there's a smart lock involved, and they need to download an app. So before they hit the facility, I want to make sure they have this app downloaded. We had introduced smart locks, and we really had to evaluate every single piece of our tenant journey and operational journey that these locks now impacted, and we had to rewrite it. And even when we thought we had gone through every piece of how just having a smart lock was going to impact our tenant journey and operational journey, there were thresholds we hadn't crossed yet because it's a new build. So until I came to that first auction unit, which was a ridiculously long time going into it, first of all, because it was a new build, but also it was actually one of the impact pieces we weren't planning for, which is when you implement, kind of a smart journey and a smart tool that uses the app, you're attracting a whole different customer. So it took us a long time to even have a delinquent unit. It took us a long time to have an auction unit because all of a sudden the technology was helping us attract a different type of tenant. So we had to make sure that our marketing pieces attracted this new type of tenant. So it's really something where if you implement even just one tool, and this is why I like doing kind of one technology at a time when you can, is because you have to really evaluate all the way through. Does this have an impact, an immediate impact? Does this have a secondary impact? Does this mean, that I need to tell my managers kind of a different, or my staff, a different process or procedure? Or maybe it's that I've got a call center that needs training to make sure that when I implement this tool, that they'll be able to use it as well. And what does that look like for them? So I think the best thing that you can do that I see a lot of operators making a mistake on is that they'll invest in the technology, but have they actually invest in the development and the deployment of that technology to make sure they're getting their most out of it? So a lot of times they'll go, well, it's expensive. And I go, why is it expensive? Well, it's because, we've turned on this service and answers phone calls for our sites, but we haven't told the managers to stop answering the phone. So therefore I'm paying for this one task twice, and that's kind of the piece that I really look at is what does it impact? What are you doing with it? And how do you need to shift that operations to either support it or to replace the tasks that it has taken over for you?
Yeah, it's easy to overlook that when you install something new or bring on a piece of
Yeah.
technology, you think it just impacts maybe like the main use case of why you're bringing it in, but then
Yeah.
it actually trickles into all these other processes that you may not realize. So that kind of brings it back to the point you had of playbooks and standard operating procedures. How
Yeah.
important is it for people to really like sit down and document that? I know it's not fun to do a lot of times, but
It's not.
really map that out and have that process in place. So when you get this technology, you really see where it's going to impact things in your kind of production process.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's so tedious that, you might do it in the beginning and then we are 5 years down the road since it's been reevaluated, or we're 10 years down the road. And what I like is when you talk to your team, they'll go like, oh yeah, these are the rules, but this is how we actually do it. And when you kind of figure out, well, why are we doing it differently than what the rules say? Are the rules out of date? Or is it that my team goes, well, that process is out of date, so therefore I'm doing something else? Or we've added a new tool in, so therefore I'm doing something else. So it's one of those pieces where every time I've implemented, I would say certainly a new technology, but even sometimes a new market, does my book still make sense for this outlier, or does it make sense as a whole, or does it make sense with a new piece that I've introduced into this? Because if not, you can run very expensive operations just by having all these little caveats of, well, it makes sense for the majority of my stores, but this outlier, I can't figure out how to get success there because I am not writing, tools into place, resources in place, procedures into place that support that outlier. And so that's where it's like, hey, we've got a plan that works for majority of our sites, or works for certain markets, or works for certain staff or technology models, but doesn't work for all of them. And that's where I really evaluate, do I need a playbook for this type of operations? Maybe it's a new facility, new build, or this is a smaller market, so therefore it has different rules of how to market and what they're doing with their time and their day. And I really look at my operations in general, and am I meeting that? Have I addressed the different components I've added in? If I've taken off a staff being at that site, what does my playbook look like for my remote resources to run that facility with the same results if they're not going to be on site every day? And that's where I really evaluate. It might not even be one standard operations for your entire portfolio. It might be a book for this type of setup and a book for that one, or just chapters that say, hey, this one applies to you, or this is a case where it doesn't apply to you. And just make sure you're set up for success for that. If you've got one certain niche and one type of market that you're going for, or one facility, fantastic. But when you expand into new markets, when you implement new tools, does it still make sense for all your sites or some of them? A lot of times, we'll see operators try a technology out at just a small sampling of stores or one market, and that market either does fantastic or terrible. And you think, well, did the company actually support that market succeeding with the new tool? Or do they just say, have fun? Now you've got something else thrown into your mix. Here's your new wild card. Hope you guys figure it out. We wish you the best. And, it's kind of hands off. So that's where I really look at taking the time to explain to your team, we made the decision because we're looking for information of these results, because we want to see this information, because we want to know if a kiosk is the right thing for us here. And I think it's important to be upfront with your team as far as what you're launching and why and what it takes for that. A lot of times, your team is really looking for how to have the tenant have a good experience. They're looking for how to be good at their job. They're looking for how to continue and how to work up. A lot of times these tools can provide them opportunities that weren't available to them when they were just simply running one store in place. There were times where I had amazing team members that I would have loved to use on other projects, but because I didn't have automations and cloud-based tools at the time, they were stuck at their one store, and I was stuck not being able to offer them more because I didn't have an opportunity where if you can't drive to this facility, if you can't travel, then this opportunity isn't available for you. You're stuck here with this limitation because my tools are limited for you. So that's the piece where I really look at, where are things going right? How can I get more of that right? Even just talking with your team, there's some managers who truly love, calling back leads and lead generation, are great at closing. How can I give them more opportunities and maybe take the next manager who doesn't do that as well, or prefers to do delinquent calls, or loves cleaning a site, and utilize them the things that they're really good at, instead of asking them all to be good at everything where they're not good at everything and we're not good at everything. So that's where I really look at, what is this tool skill set? What is this resources skill set? If that's a team member or if that's a technology, how can I free them up to do more of that? And how can I take other things off their plate so that way they have that opportunity to do so?
Yeah, and you brought up one of my favorite topics here. So let's close on this. So lead generation. So how does someone start thinking about customer acquisition and lead generation with all these new technologies, with online rentals? What's kind of a more modern approach, in your opinion, and kind of a process you would recommend to people integrating technology, but also factoring in where people still have a role in getting customers?
I think a lot of it is really following that tenant journey. So, I think of it as a freeway, and let's say that all my potential customers are driving cars on this freeway and they all have cash in hand. And I look at every opportunity for how easy it is to find me, how easy it is to click on me, how easy it is to navigate, to the page where they're actually renting a unit from, or they're finding information about that unit. And I just think every barrier that we put up, including the idea of leading them to your homepage and then having them navigate to your units that you're actually selling, all of those are potential barriers. And so I think of those as exits, where I lose a few cars. And the next step, I'm going to lose a few cars. And I hope that I get to the end of my road and I've crossed that threshold, that finish line of, they've been able to complete transaction with me as far as renting a unit. How many people do I have left? Is every little barrier that I put up from there, I lost a few more and I lost a few more. And what do I do to remove those barriers? Let's say it's something where I don't have, e-sign documents, or I don't have a way to capture their ID, and I'm forcing a team member into that role. Well, what does it look like for a team member to take it on? Does that mean I'm staffing the office 8 hours a day? Does that mean I have somebody managing an email inbox where they have to submit a form and that goes to a form and then it's reviewed? What does it look like to not automate that process and to have that barrier in place, and why? Those are the things where, especially with lead generation, we spend so much time generating people to our website. I really question why we would not let our website be a full running office, to be able to complete the sale and complete business. And doing business 24 hours a day, renting a unit at 2 o'clock in the morning, does not mean your tenant's coming out of the site at 2 o'clock in the morning. It could very well mean that, you still have operating hours and access hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. But why not take their money now? And then when it's actually time to open for business, they're already ready to go. I had a great debate with an owner one time about who rents a unit, in the middle of the night. And I finally won the argument because I was like, we are the ones who rent the unit, not during office hours. We have no time to be in an office between 9 to 5. go run an errand. Like we don't know who has time for that, but certainly not us. We're traveling, we're, managing our stores and running a business, we're eating dinner. By the time that we get off a plane and get to our hotel, we are, door dashing something in the middle of the night, running my errands, looking online. That's when I'm shopping for a unit, not at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with a lovely manager sitting in the door waiting for a person who's not going to show up. So that's where I really look at what that journey looks like as far as lead generation. If I'm pushing customers to my website, why would I let them leave it? How many am I going to lose if I let them leave it? How many am I going to lose depending upon how long that journey is? And I let my customers, I think taking them at their word. If they found me on their website, to me, they are telling me they want to do business online. If they have drove to my facility and walked in my office, they're telling me they want to do business in person. But there's too many times where because we only offer them the option to call us or show up in person, we think it's working. But really it's that we have no data to go off of because of our website doesn't complete this process. We don't have that data to analyze, or we've put in barriers to where it's not really a true comparison to say that if they walk in my office, they can do everything from A to Z, but online they can't. So is it really apples to apples? And I just try and really analyze and break that down and understand, what it looks like to staff that office journey A to Z, what it looks like to staff it on the phone A to Z, what does it look like my website? And is that what my customer wants, or is that my only choice I'm giving them?
Yeah, I love the concept you brought up of sort of like these barriers that are preventing people from converting and renting a unit. I had a facility that I was just looking at, and they were paying a lot for SEO and Google ads, and they couldn't figure out why they were literally getting 0 rentals. And I looked at the form, and I think it had 42 fields on the form before they even have to enter payment info. So they're asking 42 questions to sign up for an account, and then it takes them to the next step of the payment screen. So just nobody was filling in that form. They were looking at it and immediately hitting the back button.
It just feels like a test that they can't pass. I wasn't prepared for that. I was prepared to give you the information I know by memory, not all those details. And that's where I really look at the process. Is it easier to buy a car online than it is to rent a unit? Why? There's times where, even shopping your competitors, sometimes it's hard to be critical of your own operations because you know the whys of the costs or the pain points behind it. But I would say, visit other competitors. There's times where I've walked into a REIT and I walk into the office and the manager tells me to go online. Why? I'm here. And then when I do the rental online, it might tell me that, hey, you're almost there. Now walk into our office to complete your rental. Well, I tried to do it in the first place. It's pick a side. If I'm going to walk in, let me do it all the way through. If I'm going to go online, let me do it all the way through. Because unless I'm shopping you, you've lost me at both points.
Yeah, and sometimes these are the details that make the difference really in if your marketing works or it doesn't. A lot of times we're spending a lot on marketing, we're doing all these different tactics, and we just assume it's not working. But a lot of times there's these deeper issues that are actually preventing people from converting. And maybe your marketing would work. The traffic you're sending to your website would actually convert if you're looking at these other things. What do you think the biggest factors are, in your opinion, for like getting conversions, getting rentals? Is it the checkout process, website design? I'm sure there's a little bit of everything in here, but what's your thought
I don't know
process?
about you guys, but Amazon gets 10 to 20,000 from me a year, easy. I haven't actually done the math because I think it would, probably be depressing, but I can hit one click buy. It's going to recommend suggestions for me. Like there's just so many pieces where if other industries can do this and take our money and be easy and not have to worry about, well, what if the customer changes their mind? Great. Online retailers have figured out a long time ago how to handle, mind changes of the consumer and move on with their day. So this is a piece where our customers are smarter. The experience is smarter. Storage is very much running a chore. So if it's a chore, nobody's excited about we're going to do storage unit, over the weekend. What are your plans for this weekend? Well, I'm moving into a storage unit. That's not really something that we enjoy. So if it's going to be a chore, why make it harder than it has to be? I really look at being easy to use, being convenient. There's another piece too, where a lot of times I won't do business with a company who doesn't invest in my experience. So if you don't have a way for me to do this online, I worry about, well, is my stuff going to go past due simply because you don't have the tools in place to take money in the way that I want to pay, or to set up automations as far as running my card or drafting directly from my account. I don't have time to manage this for you. So if you're not going to offer me those tools and resources, I need to find a company who does, because I don't want this to be a chore that I not only have to do, in the beginning, I have to drive down to your site, but then I have to maintain that every single month. So I look at it as you're too small or uninvested in what the experiences I'm looking for. Therefore, have you even chose me in the first place? So if I go to your website and let's say that your SEO and Google campaign has led me there, fantastic. But that website doesn't allow me to convert or doesn't show that you're investing in my experience, likely I'm leaving and going to the next competitor who will let me do that, because I think, okay, great. their understanding of what I want to do and how I want to engage in them. And so therefore, this is off to a good start where before we relied heavily upon if my facility is clean and looks secure, then I've told my customer that I am invested in doing business with them. I think the website is that new version where if you don't have the tools and the resources there, if you don't have the technology built into it, you're telling your customer basically this is a dirty facility because I don't care enough to put back into it. And maybe it's that your customer and your clientele isn't there yet, but that's where again I go into, is somebody else in your market doing that and they're cleaning up everybody who has that desire to do website rentals and do online business with you? Or are you doing it next? Or is this an opportunity because your market isn't doing that you could lead this and gather all that traffic from it?
Yeah, yeah, that I like the point you made there too about sort of like a customer may leave and go to someone else just because they think you're not investing enough in the online experience. I think that was a good way you broke that down. And as soon as they leave your website, they're not coming back. They're going to the next facility. There's going to be someone in your market with the competition now that has a better experience, that's invested in that. And if not, they probably will be coming. So making sure we're not always doing what we want, what's best for us, but actually thinking about what is actually best for the customer and how do we make that experience better, I think is key. So Jenn, I think where can people find you if they want to either work with you or just connect with you after this podcast here?
Absolutely. So you're welcome to reach out to us on LinkedIn, or our website is empoweredselfstorage.com, and you can fill out a contact form. We're happy to get in touch with you and talk further about what your operational model is, what your goals are, and if we can be in any assistance.